For 3 years, silence took over a home where two twins refused to speak after losing their mother. Not even the best doctors, nor all the money of their millionaire father, could break through the barrier of trauma. But everything began to change when a simple, lively girl entered that colorless house. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The sprawling estate of Oak Ridge Manor loomed silently against the gray Massachusetts sky. The grand colonial mansion, with its manicured gardens and stately white columns, stood as a monument to the success of William "Will" Montgomery, one of Boston's most prominent investment bankers. From the outside, the residence projected an image of perfection. But within its walls a different story unfolded, one of unspoken grief and deafening silence. For 3 long years, the Montgomery twins, Ethan and Noah, had not uttered a single word, not even a whisper. The 8-year-old boys, once lively and talkative, had retreated into a world of their own making, after witnessing the tragic accident that took their mother, Elizabeth, from them. The memory of that rainy afternoon remained etched in the family's collective consciousness, the screeching tires, the shattering glass, the ambulance sirens wailing into the distance. In an instant, their world had changed forever. Will Montgomery paced the length of his oak-paneled study, the fading afternoon light casting long shadows across the room. At 42, his once youthful features had hardened, deep lines etched around his eyes and mouth, his dark hair now streaked with premature gray. His tall frame, usually commanding and confident in the boardroom, seemed to sag under an invisible weight as he reviewed the latest psychological evaluation of his sons. "Mr. Montgomery," Dr. Peterson had said earlier that day, her voice gentle but firm, "I believe we've reached the limits of what traditional therapy can offer the boys. Their selective mutism is deeply rooted in trauma. They understand everything. Their cognitive functions are intact, but they've simply chosen not to speak." "There must be something else we can try," Will had insisted, his voice tinged with desperation. "Money is no object. We could bring specialists from Europe, experimental treatments, anything." Dr. Peterson had simply shaken her head. "This isn't about resources, Mr. Montgomery. Your sons need something we can't prescribe or schedule. They need time and a safe environment to heal at their own pace." Now alone in his study, Will tossed the report onto his desk in frustration. 3 years of the best doctors, child psychologists, speech therapists, and trauma specialists had yielded nothing but more detailed explanations of what he already knew. His boys were trapped in silence, and he was powerless to help them. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice echoing in the quiet room. Mrs. Winters, the head of household staff, entered with her usual efficient manner. In her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, she had been with the Montgomery family for over 20 years and had become something of a constant in their fractured lives. "Sir, I wanted to discuss the new housekeeping position. As you know, Janet gave her notice last week and we'll need a replacement." Will nodded absently, his mind still on the doctor's report. "Yes, of course. Have you found anyone suitable?" "There's a Mrs. Collins, sir. Sarah Collins. Her references check out, and she's available to start immediately. She's a widow with a young daughter." Mrs. Winters hesitated. "That would normally disqualify her, but given our difficulty finding reliable help these days..." Will looked up, mildly interested for the first time. "A daughter? How old?" "7, I believe. Mrs. Collins mentioned she's normally in school during work hours, but sometimes arrangements fall through. She was very forthcoming about this potential inconvenience." Will considered this briefly. The house had once been filled with the sounds of children, laughter, running footsteps, occasional tears. Now the twins moved through the halls like ghosts, communicating only with nods, gestures, and the occasional handwritten note. Perhaps another child in the house wouldn't be the worst thing. "That's fine," he said finally. "Hire her, and tell her the daughter is welcome when necessary. We have more than enough space." Mrs. Winters looked surprised but nodded. "Very well, sir. I'll let her know she starts on Monday." After she left, Will walked to the large windows overlooking the garden. In the distance, he could see Ethan and Noah sitting side by side on the old wooden swing that hung from the massive oak tree. They weren't swinging, just sitting in perfect stillness, watching the world with identical solemn expressions. His heart constricted painfully in his chest. 3 years of silence. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of watching his sons drift further away, while he helplessly threw money and specialists at a problem he couldn't fix. The boys attended a private school with specialized staff, trained to accommodate their needs, but they had no friends, no social life beyond each other. They functioned, they ate, they bathed, they did their schoolwork with mechanical precision, but the spark that had once made them vibrant was extinguished, and it was his fault. If he hadn't been working late that night, if he had picked up Elizabeth and the boys himself instead of sending a car, if he had insisted she wait until the storm passed, the litany of if-onlys played on repeat in his mind, a tortuous soundtrack he couldn't silence. Upstairs, Eleanor Montgomery sat in her private sitting room, watching her son through the window. At 72, Will's mother remained a formidable presence, her posture as rigid as her principles. She had moved into Oak Ridge Manor after the accident, ostensibly to help with the twins, but in reality, to ensure the Montgomery name and legacy remained untarnished by scandal or impropriety. Eleanor had never approved of Elizabeth, considering her too frivolous and modern for the heir to the Montgomery fortune. When tragedy struck, she had maintained a dignified composure, stepping in to manage the household with crisp efficiency. She loved her grandchildren in her own way, distant but vigilant, more concerned with their appearance and education than their emotional well-being. Her thin lips pressed into a hard line as she watched Will by the window. He was faltering again, allowing emotion to cloud his judgment. Hiring a housekeeper with a child in tow was precisely the kind of sentimental decision that had no place in a house like theirs. But Eleanor knew better than to confront him directly. Instead, she would watch and wait, ready to intervene should this new arrangement threaten the carefully constructed order she had established. Monday arrived with a clear autumn sky, crisp and bright. Sarah Collins stood at the imposing gates of Oak Ridge Manor, clutching her daughter Lily's hand tightly. At 34, Sarah had the weary dignity of someone who had faced life's hardships head-on. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothes simple but neat, her face pretty without being remarkable, except for her eyes, which held a quiet determination. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart," she reminded Lily softly. "This is a special house with special rules. You'll be coming with me just for today while Mrs. Rodriguez is sick, but you have to be on your very best behavior." Lily nodded solemnly, her blue eyes wide as she took in the enormous house ahead. At 7, she was small for her age, with a mop of curly blonde hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. Unlike her mother's reserved demeanor, Lily radiated energy and curiosity. "Are there other kids there, Mummy?" she asked, skipping alongside her mother as they walked up the long driveway. "Yes, twin boys, but they're very shy," Sarah explained carefully. "They might not want to play or talk, and that's okay. We have to respect that." Mrs. Winters was waiting at the service entrance, her expression stern but not unkind, as she welcomed Sarah and gave a small nod to Lily. "Mrs. Collins, good morning. I'll show you your duties and the areas you'll be responsible for." She glanced at Lily. "Your daughter can wait in the kitchen. Mrs. Grayson, the cook is preparing lunch and won't mind keeping an eye on her." Sarah nodded gratefully. "Thank you. Lily has her books and coloring supplies. She won't be any trouble." As Mrs. Winters led Sarah away to begin her orientation, Lily found herself in the warm, aromatic kitchen. Mrs. Grayson, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, smiled at her. "Well, hello there, Pumpkin. Would you like a cookie while you wait? Fresh out of the oven." Lily nodded enthusiastically, her initial shyness forgotten at the prospect of homemade cookies. As she munched contentedly at the large kitchen table, she observed the bustling activity around her. The Montgomery household staff moved with practiced precision, their routines well established. But Lily's attention was soon drawn to the large bay window overlooking the garden. Outside, 2 identical boys sat under a tree, not playing, not talking, just watching the leaves fall around them. "Who are they?" she asked Mrs. Grayson, pointing. The cook's expression softened. "Those are the Montgomery twins, Ethan and Noah. Poor things. They've had a tough time of it." Lily watched the boys with growing curiosity. They looked so sad sitting there, so still and alone. Without thinking twice, she slipped off her chair and headed for the back door. "Where are you going, child?" Mrs. Grayson called after her. "Just to say hello," Lily answered with the simple logic of childhood. Nobody should look that sad on such a pretty day. Before Mrs. Grayson could stop her, Lily had disappeared into the garden, her small figure moving determinedly toward the silent twins, unaware that she was about to change the course of many lives in ways no one could have predicted. The autumn leaves crunched beneath Lily's feet as she approached the twins. Her mother had always taught her to be friendly, especially to those who seemed lonely, and these boys certainly fit that description. They sat so still they might have been part of the garden statuary, their identical faces blank, their dark hair neatly combed, their expensive clothes pristine. "Hi there," Lily called out cheerfully when she was a few feet away. "My name's Lily. My mom is working here today. What are your names?" The twins looked up simultaneously, their expressions a mixture of surprise and caution. For a moment they simply stared at the small girl with the wild curls and bright smile. Then, as if by unspoken agreement, they shifted slightly apart on the bench, creating a space between them. Lily took this as an invitation and plopped down between them. "You must be the twins Mrs. Grayson told me about. She gave me cookies. They were really good. Do you like cookies?" Neither boy responded verbally, but one of them, she couldn't tell which was which yet, gave a small nod. "I thought so. Everybody likes cookies," Lily continued, undeterred by their silence. From her pocket, she pulled out a small, slightly squashed cloth doll with yarn hair. "This is Penny. She goes everywhere with me. Do you have any special toys?" The twins exchanged a glance over her head, something passing between them that only they understood. Then the boy on her left slowly reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small worn silver compass. "Wow," Lily breathed, genuinely impressed. "That's beautiful. Does it really work?" He nodded, carefully opening the lid to reveal the delicate needle spinning before settling toward north. "My dad had one like that," Lily said, her voice suddenly quieter, "before he went to heaven. He said it would always help him find his way home." She looked up at the boy. "Is that why you keep it? To find your way?" Something flickered in the boy's eyes, a recognition, perhaps, of shared experience. Slowly, he nodded again. The other twin reached into his own pocket and produced a small, smooth stone with flecks of gold catching the sunlight. "That's pretty," Lily said, leaning closer to examine it. "Where did you find it?" The boy pointed toward a stream visible in the distance, at the edge of the property. "Can we go look for more?" Lily asked excitedly. "I've never found a stone with gold in it before." The twins looked at each other again, seemingly communicating without words. Finally, they both stood up simultaneously. One of them, the one with the compass, hesitantly extended his hand to Lily. She took it without hesitation, her small fingers wrapping around his. "Great, let's go on an adventure." As the unlikely trio made their way across the vast garden toward the stream, inside the house, Sarah Collins was learning the layout and routines of her new workplace. Mrs. Winters had been thorough in her instructions, showing Sarah the areas she would be responsible for cleaning, the proper products to use on the antique furnishings, and the schedule she was expected to maintain. "The family values their privacy," Mrs. Winters explained as they walked through the East Wing. "Mr. Montgomery works from home most days in his study, and you're not to disturb him unless specifically requested. Mrs. Montgomery Sr. takes breakfast in her room at 8 sharp and spends most mornings in her sitting room or the conservatory. The boys—" She paused, her professional demeanor slipping for just a moment. "The young masters keep to themselves. Their rooms are cleaned weekly, but otherwise we give them their space." Sarah nodded, mentally mapping the household dynamics. She had heard rumors about the Montgomery family, the tragic accident, the twin boys who never spoke, the reclusive father who had withdrawn from Boston society. But gossip was just that, and Sarah had learned long ago not to judge situations before understanding them fully. "What happened to Mrs. Montgomery?" she asked quietly. "If you don't mind my asking." Mrs. Winters' expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "An automobile accident 3 years ago. The boys were in the car with her. They were physically unharmed, but—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Since then they haven't spoken a word. Not to their father, not to the doctors, not to anyone." Sarah's heart ached at the thought. How terrible for them. For the whole family. "Yes, well," Mrs. Winters straightened her shoulders, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn in the conversation. It's not our place to dwell on such matters. We serve the family as best we can." As they continued the tour, Sarah caught glimpses of family photographs on the walls and shelves, happier times captured in silver frames. Elizabeth Montgomery had been beautiful, with a warm smile and the same dark hair as her sons. In several photos she was laughing, surrounded by her family, the joy evident even in still images. "Mrs. Winters," Sarah began hesitantly as they reached the laundry room, "where is my daughter? I should check on her." "Mrs. Grayson is watching her in the kitchen," Mrs. Winters replied. "We'll go there next." But when they arrived at the kitchen, they found Mrs. Grayson kneading dough with a concerned expression. "Where's Lily?" Sarah asked immediately, noticing her daughter's absence. Mrs. Grayson looked up, flour dusting her cheeks. "Oh dear, I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. She went out to the garden about 20 minutes ago. I tried to call her back, but she was determined to say hello to the twins. I've been keeping an eye out the window, and they seem to be getting along fine, so I didn't want to interfere." Sarah moved quickly to the window, her heart racing. "Lily knows better than to wander off," she said, scanning the garden. "Where are they now?" "They were under the oak tree last I checked," Mrs. Grayson replied, joining her at the window. "Oh my, they're not there anymore." Mrs. Winters' face had gone pale. "We need to find them immediately. If anything happens to those boys," the unspoken implication was clear, Sarah's job would be over before it had properly begun. "I'll find them," Sarah said firmly. "Which way does the garden lead?" "There's a stream at the far edge of the property," Mrs. Winters said, already moving toward the door. "The boys used to play there as before." Sarah hurried outside, following the path through the garden. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Lily falling into the stream, the boys getting hurt under her daughter's supervision, being fired on her first day. But beneath these immediate concerns lay a deeper worry. What would happen to Lily's new friends when she had to leave? Meanwhile, by the stream, something extraordinary was happening. Lily had kicked off her shoes and was wading in the shallow water, turning over stones in search of gold flecks, chattering away as if the silence of her companions was the most natural thing in the world. "My teacher says real gold is super heavy," she informed the twins, who sat on the bank watching her with fascination. "And you can test it by biting it, but I don't think that's a good idea because what if it's not gold and you end up eating a rock?" Her rambling monologue continued as she examined each stone with exaggerated concentration, occasionally holding one up for the boys' approval. They would nod or shake their heads, their eyes never leaving her. "This one looks special," she declared, holding up a smooth, heart-shaped stone. "I think you should have it," she said, presenting it to the twin with the compass. "It can keep your compass company." The boy accepted the gift solemnly, turning it over in his palm with careful fingers. Then he looked up at Lily, his mouth opening and closing as if he was trying to remember how to form words. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rusty from disuse. Lily beamed at him, apparently unaware of the monumental nature of what had just occurred. "You're welcome. What's your name?" "I told you mine, but I don't know yours yet." The boy swallowed hard, glancing at his brother, who was staring at him with wide, shocked eyes. Ethan," he managed. "I'm Ethan." His twin's lips parted in surprise, and then, as if not to be outdone, he whispered, "Noah." "Ethan and Noah," Lily repeated, nodding approvingly. "Those are nice names. Now we can be proper friends because we know each other's names." Unaware of the significance of the moment, Lily continued her search for special stones, occasionally passing her findings to the boys for their opinion. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to respond not just with nods and gestures, but with whispered words, pretty, blue, shiny, each utterance stronger than the last, as if they were exercising long-dormant muscles. It was this scene that Sarah discovered when she finally located the children, her daughter ankle-deep in the stream, laughing and talking, while the Montgomery twins, known throughout the household for their impenetrable silence, whispered back to her. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks, hardly daring to breathe. The boys were speaking. The silent twins were actually speaking. "Mom!" Lily called out, spotting her. "Look what we found. And I made friends with Ethan and Noah. They're really nice." The twins turned at Lily's exclamation, their expressions suddenly guarded again as they saw the adult approaching. But Sarah, recognizing the fragility of the moment, simply smiled and kept her distance. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said carefully. "But we need to head back to the house now. Mrs. Winters is worried." "Can we come back tomorrow?" Lily asked, splashing her way out of the stream. Sarah hesitated, looking at the twins. They were watching her intently, something like hope flickering in their identical faces. "That's not up to me, honey," she said gently. "Please," Lily pressed. "Ethan and Noah want to show me their treehouse tomorrow." "Don't you?" she asked, turning to the boys. Slowly, simultaneously, they nodded. "We'll see," Sarah said, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep. "Now put your shoes on, please. We've got to get back." As Lily struggled with her shoelaces, Ethan moved forward hesitantly. "Help," he whispered, kneeling down to assist her. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. The boy had spoken, clearly and deliberately in her presence. She watched, amazed, as his small fingers deftly tied Lily's laces. "Thank you, Ethan," Lily said, as if boys who hadn't spoken in 3 years helped her with her shoes every day. He smiled, a tiny, rusty thing, but a smile nonetheless, and nodded. Sarah knew, in that moment, that something profound had happened, something that would change many lives. She just didn't know yet how much it would change her own. As they walked back toward the house, the twins fell into step on either side of Lily, occasionally whispering words that made her giggle. Sarah followed a few paces behind, her mind racing. Should she tell someone what she had witnessed? Would they even believe her? And if they did, what would it mean for her daughter's unexpected bond with these troubled boys? By the time they reached the garden, Mrs. Winters and several other staff members were searching frantically. The head housekeeper's relief at seeing the children safe quickly turned to shock when Noah tugged at her skirt and whispered, "Stream." "We went to the stream." Mrs. Winters' hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked from the boy to Sarah, who nodded in confirmation. "I think," Sarah said quietly, "we need to speak with Mr. Montgomery." Will Montgomery was in the middle of a conference call when Mrs. Winters knocked on his study door. He held up a finger, signaling her to wait, irritation flashing across his features at the interruption. The Montgomery Financial Group was facing its 3rd consecutive quarter of declining profits, and his board members were growing increasingly concerned about his leadership. His attention to business had been sporadic at best since the accident, and though no one dared mention it directly, whispers of replacing him had begun to circulate. "Gentlemen, I need to address something urgent," Will said, cutting off a board member mid-sentence. "We'll reconvene tomorrow at the same time." Without waiting for responses, he ended the call and turned to Mrs. Winters. "This better be important." "It is." "Sir," she replied, her usual composure wavering slightly. "It's about the boys." Will's irritation instantly transformed into concern. "What's happened? Are they hurt?" "No, sir, they're perfectly fine." "Better than fine, actually." Mrs. Winters hesitated, as if not quite believing what she was about to say. "Sir, they've spoken. Both of them." Will stared at her, the words not immediately registering. "What did you say?" "Avasatamai, the twins, sir. They've spoken actual words. To the new housekeeper's daughter, and then to me." Will's legs seemed to give out beneath him as he sank back into his chair. "That's not possible. Dr. Peterson just told me yesterday that they might never—" "I heard it myself, sir. Noah spoke directly to me. He said they went to the stream." Will was already on his feet again, moving past Mrs. Winters toward the door. "Where are they now?" "In the kitchen with Mrs. Grayson. The new housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, and her daughter are with them." Will practically ran through the house, his heart pounding in his chest. For 3 years he had dreamed of hearing his sons' voices again, had prayed for it, had paid small fortunes to specialists who promised breakthroughs that never came, and now, on an ordinary Monday, a stranger's child had accomplished what no one else could. He burst into the kitchen to find an extraordinary scene. Ethan and Noah were sitting at the large wooden table, each with a cookie in hand, watching intently as a small blonde girl demonstrated how to properly dunk cookies in milk. A woman who must be Mrs. Collins stood nearby, her expression a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "You have to count to 3, the little girl was explaining seriously. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Then you pull it out fast before it gets too soggy and falls apart. That's the worst." "The worst," Noah echoed softly, testing the words. Will froze in the doorway, the sound of his son's voice hitting him like a physical blow. 3 simple words, "the worst," spoken in a voice that had been silent for 3 long years. Ethan was the first to notice his father's presence. The boy straightened in his chair, his expression guarded. "Dad," he said, the word barely audible. Will's vision blurred with tears. He took a step forward, then another, afraid that any sudden movement might break whatever spell had been cast in this room. "Ethan," he managed, his own voice strangled with emotion. "Noah." Mrs. Grayson discreetly wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. "I'll just check on the roast," she mumbled, slipping past Will into the pantry to give the family privacy. The little girl looked up at Will with curious eyes. "Are you there, Dad?" she asked straightforwardly. "I'm Lily. I tied my own shoes today, but Ethan helped because the left one was tricky." Will nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He looked at Mrs. Collins, who stepped forward with a nervous smile. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm Sarah Collins," she said, extending her hand. "I'm so sorry if Lily has been a disruption on my first day. I had no intention of bringing her with me regularly, but my childcare arrangements fell through this morning and—" "Please," Will interrupted, taking her hand. "No apologies necessary." He looked back at his sons, who were watching him cautiously. How did this happen?" Sarah shook her head, still somewhat bewildered herself. "I'm not entirely sure." Lily wandered into the garden and introduced herself. "They went to the stream to look for special stones, and by the time I found them, they were talking to her." Will pulled out a chair and sat down heavily at the table, facing his sons. "Ethan, Noah," he said gently, would you say something to me? Anything at all?" The twins exchanged their familiar glance, that silent communication that had become their primary language over the years. Then Ethan, seemingly the braver of the two today, looked directly at his father. "We found stones," he said, his voice stronger now, "at the stream. Lily gave me a heart one." Will couldn't hold back his tears any longer. They streamed down his face as Noah added, "We're going to the treehouse tomorrow." "That sounds wonderful," Will managed, reaching out to touch his son's hands. To his amazement, they didn't pull away as they had so many times before. "I've missed your voices so much." The kitchen door swung open, and Eleanor Montgomery entered, her posture rigid with disapproval. "William, what is going on?" "Mrs. Winters said you rushed out of an important call, and now I find you crying in front of the staff." Her gaze swept dismissively over Sarah and Lily. Will stood up, squaring his shoulders. For once, his mother's criticism couldn't touch him. "Mother, the boys are speaking again." "They just talked to me." Eleanor's carefully maintained composure slipped for a moment, genuine shock registering on her face. "That's impossible. The doctors said—" "Grandma," Noah said, looking up at her. "We went to the stream with Lily." Eleanor staggered slightly, reaching for the counter to steady herself. "Noah," she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "It's the little girl," Will explained, gesturing toward Lily, who was watching the proceedings with wide-eyed curiosity. Somehow she got them to speak. Eleanor's gaze sharpened as she looked at Lily and then at Sarah. "And who exactly are you?" she asked, her tone making it clear that she was addressing Sarah. "Sarah Collins, ma'am. I started work here today as a housekeeper." "And you brought your child to work on your first day?" Eleanor's disapproval was palpable. "A temporary situation, I assure you," Sarah replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "My regular childcare provider was ill." Will stepped in before his mother could continue. "Mother, the important thing is that the boys are speaking, for the first time in 3 years. This is a miracle." Eleanor seemed torn between joy at her grandson's breakthrough and suspicion of the strangers who had facilitated it. "Yes, of course," she said finally. "We should call Dr. Peterson immediately." Will nodded, though he was reluctant to turn this moment into a medical evaluation. "I will, but first," he turned back to his sons. "Would you like to show me this heart-shaped stone?" Ethan reached into his pocket and carefully withdrew the smooth river stone, placing it in his father's palm. "Lily found it," he explained. "She said it was special." Will closed his fingers around the stone, feeling its cool weight. "It is special," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Very special indeed." As the day progressed, the news of the twins' miraculous breakthrough spread through the household like wildfire. Mrs. Winters made a series of phone calls, cancelling Will's appointments for the remainder of the day, and arranging for Dr. Peterson to visit first thing the following morning. The staff moved about their duties with an air of hushed excitement, sneaking glances at the twins whenever possible, as if to confirm that the miracle was real. Will refused to leave his son's side, afraid that if he turned away, they might retreat back into silence. He sat with them in the garden, listening as they hesitantly told him about their adventure to the stream, each word a precious gift after years of absence. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her first day of work under Eleanor's watchful and critical eye. The older woman seemed determined to find fault with the new housekeeper, scrutinizing her work and making pointed comments about proper household management. Sarah bore it with quiet dignity, understanding the complex emotions at play. She was, after all, a stranger who had witnessed a deeply personal family moment. By late afternoon, when it was time for Sarah and Lily to leave, the twins became visibly anxious. "Will Lily come back tomorrow?" Noah asked his father, worry evident in his voice. Will looked at Sarah, a silent plea in his eyes. Sarah hesitated, glancing at Eleanor, who stood nearby with thinned lips and a rigid posture. "I'm scheduled to work tomorrow," Sarah said carefully. "But Lily should be in school." "Please," Ethan said, the word directed at Sarah, "we want to show her the treehouse." Will stepped forward. "Mrs. Collins, I realize this is highly irregular, but would it be possible for Lily to visit after school tomorrow? I'd be happy to arrange transportation for her." Before Sarah could respond, Eleanor interjected, "William, this is hardly appropriate. The child needs to be in school and we shouldn't disrupt the household routine further." "Mother," Will said, a new firmness in his voice, "my sons are speaking again after 3 years of silence. If they want to show their new friend the treehouse, then that's exactly what's going to happen." Eleanor's mouth snapped shut, though her disapproval remained evident in every line of her body. Will turned back to Sarah. "Please," he said quietly. "I know it's asking a lot, but—" Sarah looked at the twins, who were watching her with identical expressions of hope and anxiety. Then she glanced at Lily, who was practically bouncing with excitement at the prospect of returning to the grand house and its grounds. "Lily gets out of school at 3:15, Sarah said finally. "If someone could pick her up, I'll write a note to her teacher authorizing it." The relief and joy on the twins' faces was enough to confirm she'd made the right decision, regardless of the complications it might create in her new workplace. "Thank you," Will said fervently. "Thank you so much." As Sarah and Lily prepared to leave, the twins approached them hesitantly. Noah handed Lily a small flat stone with a perfect circle of white running through it. "For tomorrow," he whispered. "Bring it back." "I will," Lily promised solemnly, tucking the stone into her pocket. "It's our friendship stone now." Watching them, Will felt hope stirring for the first time in years. Whatever magic this child possessed, whatever connection she had formed with his sons, he was determined to nurture it, no matter what his mother or anyone else might think. After Sarah and Lily had gone, Will sat in his study, the heart-shaped stone on his desk before him. His phone rang repeatedly, board members demanding explanations for his abrupt exit from the call, business partners seeking updates on pending deals, but he ignored them all. Nothing seemed as important as the simple fact of his son speaking again. He picked up the stone, turning it over in his fingers, feeling its smooth contours. A child's gesture, finding shapes in ordinary objects, had somehow reached through the protective silence his sons had built around themselves. Where renowned specialists had failed with their clinical approaches and scientific methods, a little girl with wild curls and a bright smile had succeeded with nothing more than genuine friendship and a heart-shaped stone. Will placed a call to Dr. Peterson, briefly explaining what had happened. Her professional composure slipped as she exclaimed in disbelief and joy, promising to come first thing in the morning to assess the situation. But she also cautioned him against expecting too much too quickly. "This is a remarkable breakthrough, Mr. Montgomery," she said. "But trauma recovery isn't linear. There may be setbacks. The boys might retreat again if they feel pressured or overwhelmed." "I understand," Will replied, though in his heart he refused to believe his sons would return to silence now that they had begun to speak again. "But I want to do whatever it takes to support this progress." "Whatever it takes." As he ended the call, he looked up to find Eleanor standing in the doorway of his study, her expression unreadable. "I've instructed Mrs. Winters to prepare a light dinner for the boys in the small dining room," she said. "I thought a quiet family meal might be best tonight, given the circumstances." Will nodded, grateful for his mother's practical approach, even as he recognized the unspoken tension between them. "Thank you, Mother." Eleanor hesitated, then asked, "Do you really think it's wise to encourage this friendship with the housekeeper's daughter?" "I think it's the first thing that's worked in 3 years," Will replied simply. "And I'm not about to question a miracle." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Miracles have explanations, William, and costs. I hope you've considered both." Before Will could respond, she had turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the heart-shaped stone and the first real hope he'd felt since the day that changed everything. The following weeks brought changes to Oakridge Manor that no one could have predicted. Dr. Peterson had been cautiously optimistic after her initial assessment of the twins, describing their sudden return to speech as remarkable but fragile. She recommended maintaining whatever conditions had facilitated the breakthrough, which meant Lily became a regular fixture in the Montgomery household. Will arranged for a car to bring Lily to the manor after school each day. By the time Sarah finished her shift, Lily would be bubbling with stories about the adventures she'd had with the twins, exploring the grounds, reading books in the library, building elaborate structures with blocks, or creating treasure maps of the estate. Slowly but steadily, the twins' vocabulary expanded, their sentences grew longer, and their voices stronger. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October when Sarah arrived in the kitchen to collect Lily, only to find the room empty. Mrs. Grayson looked up from the dough she was kneading with a warm smile. "They're in the music room, dear," she said, nodding toward the east wing. "Master Ethan is showing Lily how to play the piano. You should see it. It'll warm your heart." Sarah followed Mrs. Grayson's directions down a long corridor lined with portraits of Montgomery ancestors, their stern faces seeming to judge her presence in their domain. The faint sound of a piano guided her to a set of double doors, left slightly ajar. She paused, not wanting to interrupt the moment, and peered through the crack. Inside, Ethan sat at a grand piano with Lily beside him on the bench, his hands patiently guiding hers over the keys as they picked out a simple melody. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, flipping through a book of sheet music. Will stood by the window watching his sons with undisguised joy. "Like this?" Lily asked, pressing a sequence of keys. "Almost," Ethan replied, his voice still soft but no longer a whisper. "Try again, but slower." Sarah's heart swelled at the scene. In the 3 weeks since she'd started working at Oakridge Manor, she'd witnessed an extraordinary transformation in the twins. They were still reserved around most adults, but with Lily, they were slowly becoming the children they might have been without trauma's heavy shadow. She must have made some small noise, because Will looked up suddenly, catching sight of her in the doorway. Instead of being annoyed at her intrusion, he smiled warmly and gestured for her to enter. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "please come in. Ethan has decided to give Lily piano lessons." Sarah stepped into the room, feeling slightly out of place in her housekeeper's uniform amidst the opulent surroundings. The music room was clearly designed for performances, with high ceilings to enhance acoustics and enough space for a small audience. "My mum played piano," Ethan explained to Lily, oblivious to the adults' exchange. "She taught us when we were little." Sarah's chest tightened at the casual mention of Elizabeth Montgomery. It was the first time she'd heard either boy reference their mother directly. "She was very good," Noah added from his spot on the floor. "She could play anything." Will's expression flickered with momentary pain before settling back into gentle encouragement. "Your mother would be so proud to see you teaching Lily," he said softly. Ethan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Mom said music is like magic. It makes people feel things." "I feel happy when I play," Lily declared, pressing random keys that produced a discordant jumble of notes. "Even when it sounds funny." Noah laughed, a genuine laugh that made Sarah and Will exchange surprised glances. It was a sound neither had heard before. "Mrs. Collins," Will said, moving toward her, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Sarah nodded, telling Lily she'd be back in a few minutes. Will led her to a small sitting room across the hall, closing the door partway but leaving it open enough to hear the children. "I wanted to thank you," he began, his voice sincere. These past weeks have been transformative, not just for the boys, but for the entire household. It's Lily who deserves the credit, Sarah replied honestly. She has a gift for connecting with people. Like her mother, Will said, holding her gaze a moment longer than was strictly professional. I've noticed how the staff has warmed to you. Even Mrs. Winters, who hasn't approved of anyone in 20 years, speaks highly of your work. Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly at the compliment. That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's observation, Will countered. He hesitated, then continued. Mrs. Collins, Sarah, if I may, I have a proposition for you. The familiar wariness that Sarah had developed as a widow trying to make her way in the world immediately surfaced. Men's propositions were rarely as innocent as they initially sounded. Seeming to read her expression, Will quickly added, a professional one, I assure you. The boy's tutor, Mr. Harrington, has informed me that he's taking a position at a private school in Vermont at the end of the semester. Given the boys' progress, I've been considering their return to regular school. But Dr. Peterson thinks it might be too much change too quickly. Sarah nodded, following his reasoning but unsure where she fit into this scenario. I've observed your interactions with the children, Will continued. You have a natural teaching ability. Before you became a housekeeper, did you have any experience in education? The question caught Sarah off guard. Actually, yes. I was an elementary school teacher before Lily was born. After my husband passed, I couldn't manage the hours with a young child, so I took whatever work I could find with more flexible scheduling. Will's expression brightened. I thought as much. The way you explain things to the children, your patience with them, it has the hallmark of professional training. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. Would you consider becoming the boy's tutor when Mr. Harrington leaves? The position would include a substantial raise, more regular hours, and of course Lily would be welcome after school as she is now. Sarah blinked in surprise. Mr. Montgomery, I'm flattered, but it's been years since I taught formally, and your sons would need someone qualified in multiple subjects for their grade level. You are qualified, Will insisted. More importantly, the boys trust you. That's worth more than any credential at this point. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had noticed he made when particularly earnest. Please at least consider it. You wouldn't have to decide immediately. Before Sarah could respond, the door swung open fully, revealing Eleanor Montgomery, her expression cool and assessing. William, I've been looking for you, she said, pointedly ignoring Sarah. The board members have called twice. Apparently there are decisions that cannot wait any longer. Will straightened, the warmth in his demeanor cooling noticeably. Thank you, Mother. I'll return the call shortly. Eleanor's gaze flickered to Sarah, then back to her son. I see you're busy with the staff. Should I tell them you're indisposed? The subtle emphasis on staff made Sarah's position in the household hierarchy abundantly clear. Despite the professional opportunity Will had just offered, Eleanor's presence was a stark reminder of the social gulf between them. Mrs. Collins and I were discussing the children's education, Will replied evenly. A matter of significant importance. Eleanor raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Indeed, I wasn't aware that housekeeping staff were consulted on educational matters in this household. Before Will could defend her, Sarah spoke up, her voice calm and dignified. Mrs. Montgomery, I should return to my duties. Lily and I will be heading home soon. She turned to Will. Thank you for your consideration. Mr. Montgomery, I'll think about what you proposed. She slipped past Eleanor, whose disapproving gaze followed her down the hallway. Sarah had learned to recognize that look in her 3 weeks at Oak Ridge Manor. It was the same expression Eleanor wore when examining a surface for dust or inspecting the silver for tarnish, looking for flaws, for reasons to dismiss. Back in the music room, the children were still absorbed in their impromptu piano lesson. Sarah paused in the doorway, taking a moment to compose herself before interrupting. Lily, it's time to go home, she called gently. Say thank you to Ethan for the lesson. But we're not finished, Lily protested. I almost learned Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You can continue tomorrow, Sarah promised. It's getting late and we need to start dinner. Reluctantly, Lily slid off the piano bench, giving Ethan a quick hug that made him blush. She then moved to Noah, who had approached with a book in his hands. This is for you, he said shyly. You can borrow it. It has pictures of all the constellations. For star watching. Lily took the book reverently. "Thank you, Noah. Can we look for stars tomorrow night?" "If it's clear," he agreed, glancing at Sarah as if for permission. Sarah smiled, nodding her agreement. "If it's clear and not too cold." As they walked toward the service entrance where Sarah had parked her aging car, Lily chattered about the piano lesson and her plans for stargazing. Sarah listened with half an ear, her mind preoccupied with Will's unexpected offer and Eleanor's thinly veiled hostility. Becoming the twins' tutor would mean a significant improvement in their financial situation. The substantial raise Will mentioned would allow them to move from their tiny apartment to a better neighborhood, perhaps even start a modest college fund for Lily. It would mean using Sarah's education and training again, skills she'd had to set aside in the scramble to survive after James's sudden passing. But it would also mean navigating the complicated dynamics of the Montgomery household on a more permanent basis. Eleanor clearly saw her as a threat, though to what Sarah wasn't entirely sure. The staff treated her kindly, but maintained a professional distance that reminded her daily of her place in the hierarchy. And then there was Will himself. Sarah shook her head slightly, dismissing the thought before it could fully form. Will Montgomery was her employer, a grieving widower who was understandably grateful to anyone who helped his sons. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her was nothing more than appreciation for her role in his children's recovery. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of tea, weighing her options. The apartment was clean but shabby, the furniture all second-hand, the appliances outdated. On the refrigerator, held by mismatched magnets, were Lily's school drawings and their monthly budget, a careful accounting of every penny that still often came up short. A framed photograph of James sat on the windowsill, his smile frozen in time, unaware of the struggles that would follow his departure from their lives. Sarah touched the frame gently. "What would you tell me to do?" she whispered to the image of her late husband. "Take the safe path or take a chance." The photograph offered no answers, just the familiar ache of absence. Sarah sighed, gathering her empty teacup and rinsing it in the sink. Tomorrow she would give Will her answer, though in her heart she already knew what it would be. Meanwhile, at Oak Ridge Manor, Will sat in his study, nursing a glass of scotch as he reviewed quarterly reports that had piled up during his absence from the office. The numbers blurred before his eyes, his mind drifting repeatedly to Sarah Collins and her daughter. There was a soft knock at the door, and Eleanor entered without waiting for a response. She settled into the chair opposite his desk, her posture as impeccable as always. "You missed dinner," she observed. "The boys asked for you." Guilt flashed across Will's features. "I lost track of time. Did they eat well?" "Yes, and they conversed quite animatedly about their day with the Collins girl." Eleanor's tone made it clear what she thought of this development. "William, we need to discuss what's happening in this household." Will set down his pen, recognizing the inevitable confrontation. "The boys are speaking again, Mother. They're engaging with the world. I thought you'd be pleased." "Of course I'm pleased with their progress," Eleanor replied. "What concerns me is your growing dependence on Mrs. Collins and her daughter to maintain it." "Dependence?" Will repeated. "I'm simply acknowledging what works. After 3 years of expensive specialists and therapies, it's a little girl's friendship that's brought my sons back. Why would I not encourage that?" Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering as if sharing a confidence. "Because it creates vulnerability, William. These people are strangers, who suddenly have extraordinary influence over your children. Have you even verified Mrs. Collins' background thoroughly? Her references? Her late husband's circumstances?" Will's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Winters did the standard employment verification. Sarah is a widow trying to support her child. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Eleanor countered. "Or is there another reason you're so eager to elevate her position in this household? I saw how you looked at her today." Will felt a flash of anger. "Mother, that's enough. Sarah Collins is an employee who has been instrumental in helping Ethan and Noah. I offered her the tutor position because she's qualified and the boys respond to her. That's all." "Is it?" Eleanor repeated, her gaze sharp and knowing. "William, I understand you've been alone since Elizabeth's passing. It's natural to feel drawn to someone who brings life back into your home. But there are suitable women in our social circle who would make appropriate companions. Women who understand our world, our responsibilities." Will stood abruptly, unable to contain his frustration any longer. My only concern right now is my son's well-being. Sarah Collins has done more for them in 3 weeks than all your suitable women combined have even attempted in 3 years. Eleanor remained seated, unruffled by his outburst. I'm not your enemy, William. I want what's best for this family, for our legacy. The Montgomerys have been pillars of Boston society for generations. We have a responsibility to maintain certain standards. Standards, Will repeated bitterly. Was it maintaining standards that kept you from comforting your grandsons after they lost their mother? Was it standards that made you criticize Elizabeth at every turn when she was alive? Pain flashed briefly across Eleanor's composed features. I only ever wanted Elizabeth to understand the responsibilities that came with the Montgomery name. Perhaps if she had... Don't, Will cut her off, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't you dare imply that what happened was Elizabeth's fault. A tense silence filled the study. Finally, Eleanor rose, smoothing her already immaculate skirt. We're both upset. We'll discuss this another time when you're more receptive to reason. As she reached the door, Will called after her. Sarah Collins starts as the boy's tutor in January, Mother. That decision is final. Eleanor paused but didn't turn around. We'll see, she said simply, before closing the door behind her. Alone again, Will returned to his chair, the quarterly reports forgotten. He picked up his scotch, swirling the amber liquid thoughtfully. His mother's words about his interest in Sarah had struck closer to home than he cared to admit. There was something about the young widow that drew him, her quiet strength, her kindness, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled at her daughter. But Eleanor was right about one thing. The Montgomerys lived in a world of privilege and scrutiny. Any personal connection between himself and an employee would be fodder for gossip and speculation. The last thing the boys needed was more disruption in their lives. No, Will decided, setting down his glass firmly. Whatever his personal feelings might be, he would maintain appropriate boundaries. Sarah Collins would be the twins' tutor, nothing more. The boys' recovery had to come first, before any other considerations. With renewed determination, he pulled the financial reports back toward him. The Montgomery Financial Group needed his attention now, after months of neglect. He would prove to the board, and to his mother, that he could balance his family responsibilities with his business obligations. As he began to review the figures more carefully, he couldn't help but wonder what Sarah would decide about his offer. The thought of her declining and leaving Oak Ridge Manor created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. For the boy's sake, he told himself firmly, he hoped she would accept. For the boy's sake, nothing more. The transition from housekeeper to tutor happened smoothly for Sarah. By the time January arrived, blanketing the grounds of Oak Ridge Manor in pristine snow, she had already begun shadowing Mr. Harrington to learn the twins' curriculum and routines. The East Wing guest room had been converted into a bright, well-equipped classroom, with 2 antique desks for the boys, a teacher's desk for Sarah, and colorful educational materials lining the shelves. Sarah's first official day as tutor dawned with a snowstorm that closed Lily's school. Will, anticipating this possibility, had sent his driver to bring both Sarah and Lily to the manor. Welcome to your new position, Mrs. Collins. Will greeted her at the front entrance, a significant change from her previous routine of entering through the service door. The boys have been up since dawn, excited for their first day with you. I hope I can live up to their expectations, Sarah replied, helping Lily remove her snow-dusted coat. And please call me Sarah. Mrs. Collins feels too formal for a classroom setting. Sarah, then, Will agreed with a warm smile. And you must call me Will, at least when we're not in front of the other staff. Eleanor appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her expression souring slightly at the sight of Lily, shaking snowflakes from her hair onto the marble floor. William, the board chairman, is on the phone again. He insists it's urgent. Will's smile faded. Please tell him I'll return his call in 30 minutes. I want to see Sarah and the boys settled first. Eleanor descended the stairs, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. The situation at the company won't resolve itself, William. You've been distracted for months now. Sarah felt the familiar tension that seemed to follow Eleanor wherever she went. Despite Will's decision to hire Sarah as tutor, his mother had maintained a chilly politeness that made her disapproval clear without being overtly hostile. The boys are in the breakfast room, Will told Sarah, ignoring his mother's comment. They've already eaten, but Mrs. Grayson set aside something for you and Lily. "Thank you," Sarah replied, guiding Lily toward the hallway that led to the breakfast room. As they walked away, she could feel Eleanor's gaze boring into her back. The twins' faces lit up when Sarah and Lily entered. 3 months of regular interaction had transformed the once silent boys into increasingly confident children. They still had moments of withdrawal and anxiety, particularly in unfamiliar situations or when reminded of their loss, but their progress was remarkable. "You came," Noah exclaimed as if there had been some doubt. "We thought maybe the snow would stop you." "It takes more than a little snow to keep us away," Sarah assured him, settling Lily at the table where Mrs. Grayson had laid out hot chocolate and cinnamon rolls. "Are you ready for your first official day of lessons with me?" Ethan nodded eagerly. "We made welcome signs for the classroom. And Dad got new books." "That was very thoughtful," Sarah said, touched by the gesture. "Shall we head there after Lily and I have a quick breakfast?" The morning passed in a pleasant rhythm as Sarah guided the boys through their lessons. Lily, equipped with her own workbooks and art supplies, worked quietly at a small table in the corner, occasionally joining them for story time or science demonstrations. By lunchtime, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction she hadn't experienced in years. Teaching had always been her passion, and returning to it felt like coming home. Will appeared at the classroom door just as they were finishing lunch, his expression troubled despite his attempt at a smile. "How's the first day going?" he asked, glancing around at the colorful charts and maps Sarah had hung on the walls. "Wonderfully," Sarah replied. "The boys are excellent students. We've already covered the math lesson for today and started on American geography." "Dad, Sarah knows all the state capitals," Noah informed him proudly. "Even the hard ones like Pierre and Montpellier." Will's smile became more genuine. "That's impressive. I'm not sure I could name them all myself." He glanced at his watch. "I hate to interrupt, but I need to head into the office in Boston. There's a situation that requires my attention in person." Sarah noticed the tension in his posture. "Of course. We'll continue with our afternoon lessons as planned." "Actually," Will hesitated, "I was hoping you might be able to stay late today. The roads are still being cleared and I may not be back until after dinner. Mrs. Winters has a doctor's appointment, and Mother is attending a charity board meeting that she can't reschedule." "We don't have any plans," Sarah assured him. "We can stay as long as needed." Relief washed over Will's features. "Thank you. I can have Mrs. Grayson prepare dinner for all of you. The boys will show you which television they're allowed to use in the evening, and there are plenty of games in the library." "Can we build a snowman?" Lily piped up hopefully. "If Miss Sarah approves and you bundle up properly," Will replied with a wink at Lily, who beamed at being addressed as Miss. After Will departed, the afternoon continued with lessons followed by an exuberant session of snowman building in the garden. By the time they trooped back inside, pink-cheeked and laughing, the early winter darkness had fallen, and Mrs. Grayson had prepared a hearty beef stew with fresh rolls. "Mr. Montgomery called," she informed Sarah, as the children shed their wet outerwear in the mudroom. "He said he's been delayed further and may not return until quite late. He asked if you would mind staying overnight. The blue guest suite is being prepared, with a connecting room for Lily." Sarah hesitated. Staying overnight at her employer's home, particularly with Eleanor's obvious disapproval, seemed to cross a professional boundary. But the roads were treacherous, and the thought of driving home in the dark on icy roads with Lily in the car gave her pause. "Did Mrs. Montgomery Sr. approve this arrangement?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Grayson's expression was sympathetic. "Mr. Montgomery said he would handle his mother. The important thing is your safety on these roads." She lowered her voice. "Between us, Mrs. Montgomery Sr. has already retired for the evening with one of her headaches. She may not even be aware of the arrangement until morning." After dinner, Sarah supervised the children's baths and then settled them in the Manor's cavernous library for a movie. The twins, still buzzing with excitement from their day, nestled on either side of Lily on the plush sofa, a bowl of popcorn shared between them. "This is like a sleepover," Lily whispered excitedly. "I've never had a sleepover in a mansion before." "We've never had anyone sleep over," Ethan confided, "except Grandma, but that's different." "Very different," Noah agreed with such solemnity that Sarah had to suppress a smile. As the children became absorbed in the movie, Sarah found herself wandering the library, admiring the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and first editions. The room spoke of generations of wealth and privilege, of a world so different from her own modest upbringing. Her fingers trailed over the spines of classic novels, philosophical treatises, and historical accounts. On a side table, partially hidden behind a large globe, she discovered a collection of family photographs. Unable to resist, she moved closer to examine them. Elizabeth Montgomery smiled back at her from several frames, a stunning woman with dark hair and the same expressive eyes as her sons. One photo showed her at a piano, the twins as toddlers sitting on either side of her on the bench. Another captured a family vacation on a beach, Elizabeth laughing as Will carried her over his shoulder toward the water. The happiness in these frozen moments was palpable and made Elizabeth's absence from their lives all the more poignant. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Sarah startled at Eleanor's voice behind her. She turned to find the older woman watching her with an unreadable expression, dressed in a silk robe and leaning slightly on a wooden cane, a concession to arthritis that Sarah had rarely seen her use in public. Yes, she was, Sarah agreed softly. The boys have her eyes. And her musical ability, Eleanor added, moving closer to examine the photographs. Elizabeth was an accomplished pianist. She could have performed professionally if she'd chosen that path. There was a note of something like respect in her voice that Sarah hadn't heard before when she spoke of her late daughter-in-law. The boys mentioned she taught them to play, Sarah said cautiously, aware that she was witnessing a rare moment of vulnerability from the formidable Eleanor Montgomery. Yes, from the time they could sit upright on the bench. Eleanor picked up the photo of Elizabeth at the piano, studying it with a complex expression. She had many faults, but her devotion to those boys was never one of them. Sarah remained silent, sensing that Eleanor was speaking as much to herself as to her. William called to inform me you would be staying the night, Eleanor continued, setting the photograph down with precise movements. Most irregular, but given the weather, I suppose it's sensible. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Sarah said. Mrs. Grayson mentioned you weren't feeling well. Eleanor waved off her concern. A minor headache, nothing more. I came down to check on the children before retiring properly. They both looked over at the sofa, where the movie played on, but all three children had fallen asleep. Lily in the middle, with her head against Ethan's shoulder. Noah curled up with his head on a cushion against her lap. They've had quite a day, Sarah said, smiling at the peaceful scene. Indeed. Eleanor's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. Mrs. Collins, since we find ourselves in this unexpected situation, I think it's time we spoke frankly. Sarah felt a flutter of apprehension, but nodded. Of course. Eleanor gestured toward a pair of wing-back chairs positioned near the fireplace, away from the sleeping children. Once they were seated, she fixed Sarah with a direct gaze. I want to understand your intentions regarding my son and grandsons. The bluntness of the question took Sarah aback. My intentions? I'm their tutor, Mrs. Montgomery. My intention is to provide them with a good education and support their continued progress. Come now, Eleanor said with a touch of impatience. We're both adults. A young, attractive widow in daily contact with a wealthy widower. Surely you can understand my concern. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, part embarrassment, part indignation. Mrs. Montgomery, I assure you my relationship with Mr. Montgomery, with Will, is entirely professional. My focus is on the children's education and well-being. Eleanor studied her face intently, searching for any sign of deception. You must admit your position in this household has advanced rather rapidly. From housekeeper to tutor in a matter of months, with my son already treating you with a familiarity usually reserved for family friends. That advancement came at his initiative, not mine, Sarah pointed out, and his familiarity, as you call it, is simply the natural result of our shared concern for his children. Perhaps, Eleanor conceded, though she didn't sound convinced. Nevertheless, appearances matter in our circle. Mrs. Collins, rumors and speculation can be damaging, particularly to vulnerable children who have already experienced significant trauma. Sarah bristled at the implication. I would never do anything to harm the twins. Not intentionally, I'm sure, Eleanor agreed smoothly, but consider their progress. They've opened up, they're speaking again, they're forming attachments. What happens to that progress if they become attached to you and your daughter, only to be disappointed when the situation changes? What situation? Sarah asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what Eleanor was implying. When William inevitably remarries someone from our social circle, Eleanor clarified, someone who will become the twin stepmother and assume responsibility for their upbringing. How will they handle another disruption, another female figure leaving their lives? The words stung more than Sarah wanted to admit, even to herself. The boys are resilient and I'm their tutor, not a substitute mother. When that day comes, I'll help them adjust appropriately. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. I've made some inquiries about your circumstances, Mrs. Collins. Your financial struggles after your husband's passing. The small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. The modest car that frequently needs repairs. She paused, letting the information hang between them. It would be perfectly understandable if you saw in William an opportunity for security. Sarah felt a cold fury rising within her. You investigated me. I protect my family, Eleanor replied unapologetically. William is vulnerable right now. His judgment is clouded by gratitude for your daughter's role in the twins' recovery. I needed to ensure that you weren't the type of person who would take advantage of that vulnerability. And what did you discover? Sarah asked, struggling to keep her voice even. That I'm a widow who works hard to provide for her child. That I live within my means. That I drive an old car because a new one isn't in my budget. I discovered a woman in difficult circumstances, Eleanor said carefully. Circumstances that might tempt anyone to seek advantages where they present themselves. Sarah stood abruptly, unable to continue the conversation without losing her composure entirely. I think we've said enough for tonight, Mrs. Montgomery. I understand your concerns, but I assure you my only interest is in doing my job well. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should get the children to bed. Eleanor remained seated, watching Sarah with a calculating expression. One more thing, Mrs. Collins. I've also learned that your late husband's company insurance policy paid out a rather substantial death benefit, yet you continue to live quite modestly. I wonder where those funds went. Sarah froze, her back to Eleanor. That's a very personal question. Indeed it is, Eleanor agreed. One I wouldn't dream of asking if my family's well-being weren't at stake. Sarah turned slowly, meeting Eleanor's gaze with quiet dignity. My husband's insurance money is in a trust for Lily's education. Every penny of it. James wanted her to have opportunities that he didn't, and I've honored that wish by ensuring the money is used only for that purpose. She paused, then added, You may verify that with our attorney if you wish to continue your investigation. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, or even grudging respect, crossed Eleanor's features. That won't be necessary. Your devotion to your daughter is commendable. Thank you, Sarah said stiffly. Now, if there's nothing else... Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. By all means, attend to the children. The blue suite should be prepared by now. Mrs. Winters left fresh towels and toiletries. As Sarah moved to wake the sleeping children, Eleanor called after her softly, Mrs. Collins, I hope you understand that this conversation was necessary. I don't expect us to be friends, but I do hope we can reach an understanding about boundaries. Sarah paused, considering her response carefully. Mrs. Montgomery, I respect your concern for your family, but I would appreciate the same respect for my professional integrity. I'm here to teach the twins and support their growth. Nothing more. With gentle hands, she roused the children, guiding their sleepy forms out of the library toward the guest rooms. As they left, she felt Eleanor's gaze following them, assessing, evaluating, still not entirely convinced. Late that night, after settling Lily in the connecting room and checking that she was asleep, Sarah sat on the edge of the luxurious bed in the blue suite, mentally replaying her conversation with Eleanor. The older woman's accusations and insinuations stung, particularly because they touched on a truth Sarah had been trying to ignore. She was attracted to Will Montgomery, not to his wealth or position, but to the man himself, his devotion to his sons, his quiet intelligence, the flashes of humor that occasionally broke through his reserved exterior. She admired his resilience in the face of tragedy and his willingness to set aside pride in search of help for his children. But Eleanor was right about one thing. Sarah could never truly belong in their world. The social gap between them was too wide, the potential for gossip and judgment too great. Most importantly, any personal feelings had to be subordinated to the twins' well-being. They needed stability and consistency, not complications. With a sigh, Sarah slipped between the silken sheets, resolving to maintain stricter professional boundaries moving forward. The boys' education was her priority, their progress, their healing. Everything else was secondary. Across the manor, Will Montgomery finally returned home well after midnight. He moved quietly through the darkened house, pausing briefly outside the blue guest suite before continuing to his own rooms. The knowledge that Sarah and Lily were under his roof, that the twins were forming bonds with them, filled him with a complicated mixture of gratitude and apprehension. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind, alongside the board's increasing pressure about his divided attention. Something would have to give eventually. The delicate balance he was trying to maintain between his family's needs and his business responsibilities was becoming increasingly precarious. As he prepared for bed, Will caught sight of Elizabeth's photograph on his nightstand, the one he still kept there after 3 years. Her smile seemed different tonight, more distant somehow. He touched the frame lightly as he did every night, a ritual of remembrance. "What would you think of all this?" he whispered to the image. "Would you approve of Sarah, of how the boys are healing?" No answer came, of course, just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant sound of wind rustling the bare branches outside his window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. The board was demanding more of his presence in Boston. His mother was growing increasingly concerned about appearances, and somewhere in the midst of it all, 2 young boys were finding their voices again, guided by a woman and her daughter who had entered their lives by chance. Will turned out the light, wondering what Elizabeth would say if she could see them now, this fractured family slowly, painfully attempting to rebuild itself in new and unexpected ways. Spring arrived at Oak Ridge Manor in a riot of color. Daffodils and crocuses pushed through the thawing earth, the ancient oak trees sprouted tender green leaves, and the twins' progress bloomed just as vibrantly. By April, Ethan and Noah were speaking in full, complex sentences, laughing openly, and even beginning to socialize with children outside their small circle. One Wednesday afternoon, as Sarah packed up the day's schoolwork, Will appeared in the classroom doorway, his face alight with barely contained excitement. "I have news," he announced to the room at large. "Dr. Peterson believes the boys are ready to try a school visit." Ethan and Noah, who had been helping Lily build a model volcano for her science project, looked up with a mixture of interest and apprehension. "A real school?" Noah asked. "With other kids?" Will nodded, crossing the room to kneel beside his sons. "Brookfield Academy has a program where prospective students can spend a day experiencing classes. Dr. Peterson and I thought you might try it next Monday, just to see how it feels." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a habit that persisted despite their return to verbal expression. "Would we be in the same class?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Absolutely," Will assured him. "The school understands your situation. They're prepared to accommodate whatever makes you comfortable. Can Sarah come?" Noah's question revealed the anxiety beneath his apparent calm. Will glanced up at Sarah, who had been listening quietly. "Sarah would drop you off and pick you up, but the idea is for you to experience the classroom independently. It's a small step toward potentially returning to regular school in the fall." Sarah moved closer, sensing the twins' unease. "It's normal to feel nervous about something new," she told them gently, "but remember how far you've come. 6 months ago you weren't speaking at all. Now look at you, building volcanoes and reading chapter books." "Will Lily be there?" Ethan asked hopefully. "Lily attends a different school," Sarah reminded him. "But you could tell her all about your day afterward." Lily looked up from the volcano model, her face brightening. "You can be like spies on a mission, gathering information about what big kids' school is like." This framing appealed to the boys, who began to nod cautiously. "We could try it," Noah conceded. "But if we don't like it, then we try something else," Will finished for him. "This isn't a test and there's no rush. It's just an opportunity to explore options." As the children returned to their volcano construction, Will motioned for Sarah to join him in the hallway. Once they were out of earshot, his professional demeanor softened into something more personal. "Thank you for supporting this," he said quietly. Dr. Peterson thinks your endorsement carries significant weight with them. They trust you too, Sarah assured him. They just process change differently after everything they've been through. Will nodded, leaning against the wall with a sigh. Sometimes I wonder if I'm pushing too hard, too fast. They've made such progress here with you. And they'll continue that progress wherever they go, Sarah said firmly. They're resilient children, Will. They've found their voices again. Now they need opportunities to use them in wider circles. A complicated emotion flickered across Will's features, pride mingled with something like loss. When they return to regular school, your position here will naturally conclude, Sarah finished for him, ignoring the twinge in her chest at the thought. That's always been the plan. My job is to prepare them for that transition. Right, Will agreed, though he seemed oddly reluctant. Of course. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Over the months, their professional relationship had developed an undercurrent of something deeper. Small moments of connection over shared concerns for the children, brief touches that lingered a heartbeat too long, glances that communicated more than words could safely express. Eleanor had noticed, of course. Her watchful eyes missed nothing, and her subtle interventions were constant, interrupting private conversations, arranging for suitable young women from prominent Boston families to visit the manor, reminding Will of his social obligations and position. The board meeting went well yesterday, Will said, changing the subject. They've stopped suggesting I step down as CEO, at least for now. That's wonderful news, Sarah replied sincerely. I know how hard you've been working to balance everything. Will's expression softened. I couldn't have managed any of it without you, Sarah. What you've done for the boys, for this family. The sound of Eleanor's approaching footsteps cut the conversation short. She appeared around the corner, elegant as always in a tailored spring ensemble, her silver hair perfectly styled. William, there you are, she said, her tone pleasant, but her eyes sharp as they took in the scene before her. Rebecca Cunningham called. She's in town for the hospital fundraiser and asked if you might escort her. Will's expression closed like a book snapping shut. I'm afraid I'm unavailable. The boys have their school visit on Monday to prepare for. The visit is Monday, not this weekend, Eleanor pointed out. Rebecca is one of the most eligible women in Boston society. Her father sits on 3 corporate boards, including yours. Surely you can spare one evening for a social obligation that could benefit the company. The subtle reminder of his duties hung in the air. Sarah took a small step back, physically removing herself from the family discussion. I should check on the volcano, she murmured, turning toward the classroom. Sarah, Will called after her, something like regret in his voice. She paused but didn't turn around. The children are waiting, Mr. Montgomery, she said formally, aware of Eleanor's scrutiny. We can discuss Monday's arrangements later. The weekend arrived with perfect spring weather. Sarah spent Saturday morning tending to her small garden behind the apartment building, Lily chattering beside her as they planted tomato seedlings and marigolds. The simple activity was a welcome respite from the increasingly complex emotional landscape of Oak Ridge Manor. Mom, can I ask you something? Lily said, patting soil around a strawberry plant. Of course, sweetheart. Do you like Mr. Montgomery? Like him? Sarah nearly dropped her trowel. What makes you ask that? Lily shrugged, her expression wise beyond her years. You look at him the way Maddie's mom looks at her new husband. And sometimes he looks at you that way too when he thinks nobody's watching. Sarah busied herself with the seedlings, buying time to formulate a response. Mr. Montgomery and I work together. We both care about Ethan and Noah's well-being, that's all. But you smile different when he comes in the room, Lily persisted. And your cheeks get pink. Lily, Sarah said more firmly than she intended. Mr. Montgomery is my employer. Our relationship is professional. Lily sighed dramatically. Grown-ups make everything so complicated. If you like someone, you should just tell them. It's not that simple when you're an adult, Sarah tried to explain. There are responsibilities and considerations beyond just feelings. Like Mrs. Montgomery Sr. not liking us, Lily asked bluntly. Sarah paused, surprised by her daughter's perception. What makes you think she doesn't like us? She looks at us like we have mud on our shoes, even when we don't, Lily said matter-of-factly. And she always interrupts when you're talking to Mr. Montgomery. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought ruefully. Mrs. Montgomery Sr. is very protective of her family. She wants what she thinks is best for them. And she doesn't think we're best, Lily concluded with the straightforward logic of childhood. Even though we helped Ethan and Noah talk again, Sarah set down her gardening tools and turned to face her daughter fully. Lily, listen to me. What you did for the twins was extraordinary. You reached them when no one else could. But our job there was never permanent. Eventually the boys will return to regular school, and our lives will go back to how they were before. I don't want them to, Lily said quietly, looking down at her dirt-stained hands. I like having Ethan and Noah as friends, and I thought maybe— She trailed off, suddenly shy. Thought what, honey? That maybe we could all be a family someday. Like in the movies, when the dad realizes he loves the nice lady who helps his kids, and then everybody lives together and they're happy. Sarah's heart ached at the simple wish. Real life isn't like the movies, sweetheart. Mr. Montgomery and I come from very different worlds. But he smiles at you like Daddy used to, Lily insisted. I remember. The mention of James brought a lump to Sarah's throat. Let's finish the planting, she said gently. Then we can make lunch and plan what to bake for the twins' school visit. I was thinking cookies might be a nice treat for afterward. Lily allowed the subject change, but her observation lingered in Sarah's mind throughout the weekend. Monday morning dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for new beginnings. Sarah arrived at Oakridge Manor early to help prepare the twins for their school visit. She found them in the breakfast room dressed in matching Brookfield Academy uniforms, their expressions solemn. You both look very handsome, she told them, straightening Noah's tie. How are you feeling? Nervous, Ethan admitted. Scared, Noah added. Both completely normal feelings, Sarah assured them. Remember, this is just a visit. You'll be together the whole time and I'll be back to pick you up at 3 o'clock sharp. Will entered, impeccably dressed in a business suit. They'll be driving you all to Brookfield, he announced. I've cleared my morning schedule. The drive to the prestigious private school was quiet, the twins sitting between Sarah and Will in the back of the town car, each boy holding tightly to one of their hands. When they arrived at the imposing brick building with its manicured grounds, a welcoming committee awaited them, the headmaster, a school psychologist, and a friendly-looking teacher. The goodbyes were brief but emotional. Noah clung to Sarah for an extra moment, whispering, "Promise you'll come back," in her ear. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," she whispered back, a childhood phrase her own mother had used. 3 o'clock right here. As the twins walked away, each casting anxious glances over their shoulders, Sarah felt an unexpected surge of emotion, pride mixed with a peculiar sense of loss. Will stood beside her, watching his sons with similar feelings written plainly on his face. "They'll be fine," she said, as much to reassure herself as him. "I know," he replied, his voice thick. "It's just, 3 years ago I thought I might never hear them speak again. Now they're walking into a school about to talk to teachers and other children. It's a miracle," Sarah finished when he couldn't find the words. "One you and Lily made possible," Will added, turning to look directly at her. "Sarah, there's something I need to— Mr. Montgomery." The headmaster approached, hand extended. "Could I have a word before you leave? Some paperwork requires your attention." The moment broken, Will nodded and followed the headmaster back toward the administration building. "I'll see you at 3, he called back to Sarah. "We'll talk then." The hours crawled by as Sarah waited anxiously for pickup time. She tried to focus on errands, grocery shopping, banking, a quick stop at the library, but her thoughts kept returning to the twins, and to Will's unfinished sentence. By 2:30 she couldn't wait any longer, and headed back to Brookfield, arriving at the designated pickup area 15 minutes early. To her surprise, Will was already there, pacing beside his car. "You're early," she observed, approaching him. "Couldn't focus on work," he admitted with a rueful smile. "How was your day?" "Longest one of my life," Sarah confessed. "I kept wondering how they were doing." "I called at lunchtime," Will said. "The teacher said they were doing remarkably well." "Quiet but participating." "That's wonderful news," Sarah replied, genuine relief washing through her. They stood together in companionable silence, watching as parents began to arrive for the regular dismissal. Finally, Will spoke again, his voice low and determined. "Sarah, about what I was trying to say this morning." The school doors opened and children began streaming out. Among them were Ethan and Noah, walking close together but with unmistakable smiles on their faces. The conversation was again postponed as the twins spotted them and rushed over, both talking excitedly about their day. We had science class with real experiments. There's a boy named Michael who collects rocks too. First in Mart. The lunch was pizza and it was really good. Our teacher, Mrs. Bennett, has a hamster in the classroom named Whiskers. The flood of information continued all the way back to the car, with Will and Sarah exchanging delighted glances over the boys' heads. Whatever nervousness the twins had felt that morning had clearly given way to enthusiasm. As they drove back to Oak Ridge Manor, Sarah noticed Will checking his watch repeatedly. "Do you need to return to the office?" she asked quietly while the boys were distracted with describing the playground to each other. "No," he replied, "but I was hoping we might stop somewhere on the way home. There's something I'd like to show the boys. And you." Intrigued, Sarah nodded her agreement. Will directed the driver to take a different route, one that led away from both Boston and Oak Ridge Manor, toward the coastline. After 20 minutes, they pulled up to a charming seaside property, a weathered grey Cape Cod-style house with blue shutters, surrounded by a white picket fence and overlooking a small private beach. "Where are we?" Noah asked, peering out the window curiously. Will smiled, a mixture of nervousness and excitement in his expression. "This is a house I've been thinking about buying. As a weekend place for us, somewhere. Less formal than Oak Ridge, somewhere new with no sad memories." The twins' eyes widened as they took in the cozy house and its stunning ocean view. "Can we see inside?" Ethan asked eagerly. "That's why we're here," Will confirmed, opening the car door. "The realtor left the key for us to explore on our own." As they walked up the shell-lined path to the front door, Sarah held back slightly, feeling like an intruder on a private family moment. Will noticed her hesitation and turned back. "I'd really like your opinion too, Sarah," he said quietly. "The boys value your perspective, and so do I." Inside, the house was everything Oak Ridge Manor was not. Warm, informal, filled with natural light and ocean views from every window. The furniture was comfortable rather than antique, the kitchen designed for actual cooking rather than staff preparation, the overall feeling one of a true family home rather than a showcase. The twins ran from room to room, exclaiming over the window seats, the built-in bookshelves, and especially the two identical bedrooms with nautical themes. A deck wrapped around the back of the house, providing a panoramic view of the Atlantic. "What do you think?" Will asked Sarah as they stood on the deck, watching the boys explore the small stretch of private beach below. "It's beautiful," she replied honestly. "So peaceful and welcoming. The boys clearly love it. And you?" Will pressed. "Could you see yourself here?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "Me? This would be your family home, Will." He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "That's what I've been trying to tell you all day. I want you to be part of that family, Sarah. You and Lily." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere between watching you help my sons find their voices again and seeing the way you encourage their independence today, I realized that I've fallen in love with you," Will said, the words finally free after months of careful restraint. "I know it's complicated, our different backgrounds, my mother's expectations, the children's needs, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just gratitude or friendship." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to process his declaration. "Will, this is so unexpected. Is it?" he asked gently. "Haven't you felt it too? This connection between us that goes beyond our work with the boys?" Before Sarah could respond, Noah's voice called up from the beach. "Dad, Sarah, come see what we found." Will held her gaze for a moment longer. "We should join them. But please think about what I've said, about what this could mean for all of us." As they walked down to the beach, Sarah's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Yes, she had feelings for Will, feelings she had tried to deny out of professional responsibility and awareness of their different social positions. But the barriers that had seemed so insurmountable still existed. Eleanor's disapproval, the potential impact on the twins' recovery, the whispers that would inevitably follow if the wealthy Will Montgomery became involved with his son's former housekeeper. On the beach, the twins proudly displayed the perfect sand dollar they had discovered. As Will examined their treasure with appropriate admiration, Sarah watched the three of them together, this father who had fought so hard for his son's healing, these boys who had overcome unimaginable trauma, to find their voices again. She thought of Lily, who had bridged the silence with her simple, childlike openness. And she thought of herself, a widow who had rebuilt her life from tragedy, focusing on her daughter's future while setting aside her own dreams and needs. Could they really form a family together? Bridge the gaps of wealth, social status, and expectation to create something new and whole. As if reading her thoughts, Will looked up and met her gaze, his eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. In that moment, Sarah realized that despite all the external barriers, the real question was simpler. Did she love him enough to try? The answer came with surprising clarity, rising from a place in her heart that had been dormant since James's passing. Yes, she did. Despite the complications, despite Eleanor's opposition, despite the unconventional beginning of their connection, or perhaps because of all these things, Sarah Collins had fallen in love with William Montgomery. But before she could find the words to tell him, a familiar car appeared in the driveway of the beach house. Eleanor Montgomery had arrived, her timing as impeccable as ever, and the expression on her face suggested that the real battle was only just beginning. Eleanor Montgomery stood on the deck of the beach house, her rigid posture at odds with the casual seaside setting. The ocean breeze ruffled her perfectly styled hair as she watched Will and Sarah climbing the wooden steps from the beach, the twins running ahead with their sand-dollar treasure. "Mother," Will said, surprise evident in his voice. "How did you find us?" "Your assistant mentioned you were viewing the Peterson property," Eleanor replied coolly. "When you didn't return to Oak Ridge at the expected time, I decided to join you." Her gaze shifted to Sarah. "I wasn't aware Mrs. Collins would be part of this family decision." The emphasis on family was unmistakable. Before Will could respond, the twins burst onto the deck, excitement overriding their usual caution around their grandmother. "Grandma, look what we found!" Noah thrust the sand dollar toward her proudly. Eleanor's expression softened fractionally as she examined their discovery. "Very nice, Noah. A perfect specimen. We want to put it in our room here," Ethan added. "Dad's buying this house for weekends." Eleanor's eyebrows rose as she looked at Will. "Is that so? How interesting that such a significant decision was made without family discussion." "I haven't made an offer yet," Will clarified. "I wanted the boys to see it first." "And Mrs. Collins," Eleanor added. "I see she was consulted before your own mother." Sarah felt the familiar tension descending over what had been a magical afternoon. "I should check on the time," she said, stepping away to give the family privacy. "The boys have homework to complete before dinner." As she moved toward the kitchen, she heard Will's voice, low but firm. "Mother, we need to talk." "But not here, not now." Inside the house, Sarah busied herself gathering the boys' jackets and the seashells they had collected. The perfect bubble of possibility that Will's declaration had created was rapidly deflating under Eleanor's disapproving presence. How could they ever make this work with such fundamental opposition? The drive back to Oak Ridge Manor was strained, with Eleanor following in her own car. The twins, sensitive to adult tensions, grew quiet and withdrawn. By the time they arrived, the excitement of the school visit and beach house exploration had dimmed considerably. "I'll take the boys up for their homework," Sarah offered, giving Will a meaningful glance. "Perhaps you and your mother would like some time to talk." Will nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll check on them before dinner." As Sarah guided the twins toward the staircase, Eleanor's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Collins, a word before you go." Sarah turned, steeling herself. "Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. I understand you've made special cookies to celebrate the boys' school visit," Eleanor said, her tone surprisingly cordial. "Perhaps you could have Mrs. Grayson serve them in the library after homework is complete. I believe a family celebration is in order." The emphasis on family was again deliberate, but Sarah simply nodded. "The cookies are in the kitchen. I'll mention it to Mrs. Grayson." "Thank you," Eleanor said before turning back to Will. "Shall we use your study for our discussion, William?" As Sarah supervised the twins' homework in the classroom, she tried not to think about the conversation happening elsewhere in the house. Instead, she focused on the boys' excited recounting of their day at Brookfield Academy, asking questions about their favorite activities and the children they had met. "Do you think we could go there for real school?" Noah asked hesitantly. "In the fall, if that's what you want and what your father thinks is best," Sarah replied carefully. "You certainly showed today that you're ready for new challenges." Ethan looked up from his math worksheet. Would you still teach us if we go to real school? The question Sarah had been dreading. No, sweetheart. If you attend Brookfield, you'll have the wonderful teachers there, like Mrs. Bennett. But we'd still see you, right? Noah pressed, anxiety creeping into his voice. You and Lily would still come over? Sarah hesitated, uncertain how to answer. Before Will's declaration at the beach house, she would have gently prepared them for an eventual separation. Now everything was uncertain. Let's focus on your homework for now, she said instead. I hear your grandmother has arranged for cookies in the library afterward. This distraction worked temporarily, but Sarah knew the question would resurface. The twins had already experienced too much loss to accept another without preparation. An hour later, homework completed and cookies distributed in the library. Sarah was gathering her belongings to leave when Will appeared in the classroom doorway. His expression was complicated, determined yet troubled. Can you stay a bit longer? He asked quietly. After the boys are settled for the evening, I'd like to continue our conversation from the beach. Sarah nodded, her heart racing. I'll need to call Mrs. Rodriguez to stay with Lily a while longer. Already taken care of, Will said. I called her myself to explain we had school matters to discuss. Eleanor's influence was evident at dinner, where she dominated the conversation with questions about Brookfield Academy, carefully steering topics away from the beach house or any mention of Sarah's role in the day. The twins, still sensitive to adult undercurrents, answered politely, but without their earlier enthusiasm. After the boys were tucked into bed, with promises of beach house visits in their dreams, Sarah found herself in Will's study, the inner sanctum of Oak Ridge Manor, with its leather-bound books, antique desk, and oil portraits of Montgomery ancestors watching from the walls. Will closed the door and gestured for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs by the fireplace, where a small blaze took the chill from the spring evening. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed one to Sarah. I think we've earned this today, he said with a tired smile. Sarah accepted the glass, but didn't drink. How did your conversation with your mother go? Will sighed, taking the chair opposite hers. About as expected. She believes I'm making decisions based on emotion rather than reason. That I'm rushing into changes that could destabilize the boys' progress. That I'm ignoring family traditions and expectations. He took a sip of his drink. And that I'm being manipulated by a woman who sees an opportunity to improve her station in life. The blunt summary of Eleanor's objections stung, but didn't surprise Sarah. She's never going to accept me, Will, or what you proposed at the beach house. I don't need her approval, Will said firmly. I'm 42 years old, not a child requiring permission. But you do need her cooperation, Sarah pointed out. She lives here. She's the boy's grandmother. If we were to... She hesitated over the word. If we were to pursue a relationship, her opposition would affect everyone, especially Ethan and Noah. Will set his glass down and leaned forward. Sarah, my mother raised valid concerns about timing and stability for the boys. Those we can address. But her objections to you personally, your background, your financial situation, those I reject completely. His voice softened. I meant what I said at the beach. I love you. Not because you helped my sons, though I'll be forever grateful for that, but because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your intelligence, the way you've raised Lily to be so. Compassionate. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. Will, I care for you too, more than I should given our circumstances. But your mother isn't entirely wrong. We come from different worlds. Your family has expectations, traditions. The society you move in would never fully accept me. The society I move in, Will repeated with a hint of bitterness. The same society that disappeared when tragedy struck. That whispered about my poor motherless boys, but never once offered real support. He shook his head. I've learned who truly matters, Sarah, and it isn't the people on my mother's approved list. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. To Sarah's surprise, Eleanor entered without waiting for a response, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. I apologize for the intrusion, she said, but there's something I need to say, and I think Mrs. Collins should hear it as well. Will tensed visibly. Mother, we're in the middle of a private conversation. Yes, about your intention to pursue a relationship with Mrs. Collins, I presume, Eleanor said bluntly. She turned to Sarah, My son believes I object to you because of your economic background, your lack of social connections. He thinks I'm an elitist snob protecting family traditions." Sarah remained silent, unwilling to be drawn into conflict. "The truth," Eleanor continued, moving further into the room, "is both simpler and more complex. I've watched my son suffer unimaginable pain. I've seen my grandsons retreat into silence. For 3 years, I've tried to hold this family together with whatever tools I had. Structure, routine, adherence to familiar patterns." She lowered herself into a chair, suddenly looking all of her 72 years. "When you and your daughter entered our lives, everything began to change." The boy started speaking again. William began engaging with the world. The house filled with noise and life. She looked directly at Sarah. It terrified me. The admission hung in the air between them. Will stared at his mother in disbelief. "Terrified you? Why?" "Because I couldn't control it," Eleanor admitted quietly. "Because it meant risking hope again, after we'd all adjusted to living without it. Because if this miracle failed, if the boys retreated again, or if you were hurt again, William, I didn't think our family could survive another loss." Sarah found her voice at last. "Mrs. Montgomery, I never intended to disrupt your family." "But you did," Eleanor replied without accusation. "Your daughter cracked open the shell the twins had built around themselves. You provided a model of strength after terrible loss that resonated with William in ways my stoic approach never could. You showed an alternative to our careful, controlled existence." Her voice softened slightly. "And in doing so, you revealed the inadequacy of my methods." Will shook his head. "Mother, that's not—" "Please, William, let me finish," Eleanor interrupted, an unusual vulnerability in her expression. "Today, when I saw you at that beach house, a property I didn't even know you were considering, I realized how far outside this family's decisions I had been pushed. Not by you or Mrs. Collins, but by my own rigidity." She straightened in her chair, her dignity reasserting itself. "I still have concerns about rushing into changes. The twins have made remarkable progress, but they remain vulnerable. Your company still requires attention that a new relationship might divert. And yes, there will be social complications that shouldn't be dismissed entirely. But," Will prompted, sensing there was more. "But," Eleanor continued, "I've been forced to acknowledge that my way isn't the only way. That perhaps this family needs something I can't provide. The warmth and adaptability that Mrs. Collins and her daughter have brought into our lives." Sarah looked at the older woman in astonishment. "Are you saying you no longer object to Will and me?" "I'm saying," Eleanor clarified, "that my grandson spoke his first word in 3 years to your daughter. That fact alone deserves consideration beyond my personal preferences." She rose to her feet, smoothing her skirt with practiced hands. "William, whatever you decide, I will not stand in your way. But I do ask that you proceed with care, considering all implications for the children involved." With that, she left the study as regally as she had entered it, closing the door quietly behind her. Will and Sarah sat in stunned silence for several moments. Finally, Sarah spoke. "That was unexpected." "To put it mildly," Will agreed, still processing his mother's surprising shift. "In all my years, I've never heard her admit she might be wrong about anything." "She didn't exactly say she was wrong," Sarah pointed out with a small smile. "Just that there might be alternative approaches worth considering." Will laughed softly. "For Eleanor Montgomery, that's practically a complete surrender." His expression grew serious again, but she did raise valid points about moving carefully. "The boys have made incredible progress, but it's still relatively new." Sarah nodded. "And Lily has her own vulnerabilities. She lost her father at a young age. The idea of a new family is appealing to her, but it would be a significant adjustment. So we take it slowly," Will said, reaching across to take her hand. "Get to know each other outside the roles of employer and employee. Let the children grow comfortable with the possibility of us as a couple before making any permanent changes." "What about the beach house?" Sarah asked. "I think I'll make an offer," Will decided. "Regardless of what happens between us, the boys loved it there. It could be a fresh start, a place without painful memories where they can just be children again." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "And us? What exactly are you proposing, Will Montgomery?" He smiled, the warmth reaching his eyes. "I'm proposing that you allow me to court you properly, Sarah Collins. Dinners out, conversations that don't revolve around curriculum or the twins' progress. The chance to discover who we are together, beyond Oakridge Manor and its complicated dynamics. Court me? Sarah repeated with a teasing smile. That sounds very old-fashioned. I am somewhat old-fashioned, Will admitted, but I'm learning to adapt. He grew serious again. Sarah, I know this won't be simple. There will be adjustments, complications, moments of doubt. But I believe what we could build together is worth those challenges. Sarah thought of Lily's simple observation that grown-ups made everything complicated when they should just tell people how they felt. Perhaps her daughter had the right idea after all. I love you too, Will, she said simply. I tried not to. I told myself it was inappropriate, impossible. But the heart doesn't always follow practical considerations. The joy that spread across Will's face made him look years younger. Then we'll figure out the rest together, he said, lifting her hand to his lips. Summer unfurled over Oakridge Manor, bringing new growth to the gardens and new developments to the blended family taking shape within its walls. The beach house purchase was completed, providing a weekend retreat where formal rules relaxed and new traditions began to form. Eleanor surprised everyone by adapting to the casual seaside setting, even occasionally joining the children for shell-collecting expeditions. Her designer slacks rolled up to accommodate the tide pools. By mid-July, Will and Sarah's courtship had progressed from careful restaurant dinners to comfortable family outings with all the children. The twins, initially anxious about the changing dynamics, gradually embraced the possibility of Sarah and Lily becoming permanent fixtures in their lives. Would Lily be our sister? Noah asked one evening as Sarah tucked him into bed. If you and Dad got married? Sarah smiled gently. She would be your stepsister. But family isn't always about labels, Noah. It's about who we choose to love and care for. Like how you chose to care for us, even though you weren't our real mom? Ethan asked from his adjacent bed. Sarah's heart swelled. Exactly like that. I think Mom would like you, Noah said sleepily. She always said love makes families, not just being born into them. Sarah blinked back unexpected tears. That sounds like a very wise perspective. Do you think she'd be mad? Ethan's question came hesitantly, voicing a worry Sarah suspected had been weighing on both boys. Mad about what, sweetheart? I see about us loving you too, and about Dad maybe loving you. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. I never knew your mother, but from everything I've heard, she loved you both more than anything. People who love that deeply want happiness for those they care about, even when they can't be there themselves. Noah nodded thoughtfully. That's what Dad says too. That Mom would want us to be happy again. Your father is a very wise man, Sarah agreed softly. So you'll marry him? Ethan asked with a child's directness. And live here with us and Lily? Sarah laughed gently. That's something your father and I are still figuring out. But whatever happens, I promise that Lily and I will always be part of your lives. This promise seemed to satisfy the twins, who drifted off to sleep with peaceful expressions. Sarah lingered a moment longer, watching their identical chests rise and fall with steady breaths, marveling at how far they had come from the silent, withdrawn children she had first encountered. Downstairs, she found Will and Eleanor in the library, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation that halted when she entered. The boys are asleep, she reported, hesitating at the doorway. I should call for the car. Lily will be wondering where I am. Actually, Will said, exchanging a glance with his mother, we were just discussing something that concerns you. Sarah, please join us. Intrigued, Sarah took a seat on the sofa opposite Eleanor, who surprisingly offered her a small, genuine smile. William has been sharing his thoughts about the future, Eleanor explained, specifically about making certain changes to the household arrangements. Sarah looked between them uncertainly. What kind of changes? Will moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. I've asked Mother to consider relocating to the Beacon Hill townhouse. Sarah's eyes widened. You're asking your mother to move out? At my suggestion, Eleanor clarified. The townhouse has been sitting empty since my sister passed. It's more manageable for a woman of my age, and closer to my social engagements in the city. But this is your home, Sarah protested, surprised to find herself defending Eleanor's place at Oakridge. This was my home, Eleanor corrected gently, but it should be a home for a growing family now, not a widow set in her ways. She glanced at Will. Besides, the Beacon Hill property is barely 15 minutes away. I'll hardly be exiled. Will squeezed Sarah's hand, which brings us to the next change we've been discussing. The meaningful look in his eyes made Sarah's heart race. Will? The boys will be attending Brookfield Academy in the fall, he said. They're ready, thanks largely to your excellent preparation, which means your role as their tutor will naturally conclude. Despite knowing this was coming, Sarah felt a pang of loss. Yes, I understand. But, Will continued, his eyes never leaving hers, I'm hoping you might consider a different position here at Oak Ridge Manor. What position would that be? Sarah asked, though her accelerating pulse suggested she already knew. Will slid from the sofa to one knee before her, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. I was thinking wife, partner, mother to our combined family, and mistress of Oak Ridge Manor might be appropriate titles. Sarah gasped as he opened the box to reveal an elegant diamond ring. Beautiful but not ostentatious, Sarah Collins, Will said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. These past months have shown me what it means to find love after loss, to build something new from broken pieces. You brought voices back to my silent children, and then you brought your voice, your wisdom, your laughter, your perspective, into my life when I needed it most. He took a deep breath. I love you. I love Lily. I want us to create a family together, blending all the pieces of our separate lives into something stronger and more beautiful. Will you marry me? Sarah was vaguely aware of Eleanor discreetly leaving the room, giving them privacy for this moment. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the man before her, this strong, loving father who had fought through grief to rebuild a life for his sons, and who now wanted to include her and Lily in that life. Yes, she whispered. Then more firmly, yes, I will marry you. Will Montgomery. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, footsteps pattered in the hallway, followed by 3 small figures bursting into the library. Ethan, Noah and Lily all in pajamas, their faces alight with excitement. Did you say yes? Lily demanded, bouncing on her toes. Are we going to be a real family? Sarah looked from her daughter to the twins, whose identical faces shone with hope and joy. You were all in on this? Noah nodded proudly. We helped Dad pick the ring. And Grandma helped us plan when to come downstairs, Ethan added. And I practiced being the flower girl, Lily announced. Mrs. Grayson let me use rose petals from the garden to practice walking. Will laughed, rising to his feet and pulling Sarah up with him. It seems our entire household has been conspiring behind your back. My love. The best kind of conspiracy, Sarah agreed, opening her arms to embrace all 3 children as they rushed forward. Standing in the circle of her new family's arms, Sarah felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced since losing James. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a new creation, different, unexpected, but no less precious for having grown from sorrow's soil. In the doorway, Eleanor Montgomery watched the scene with a complex mixture of emotions. Change had never come easily to her, yet she couldn't deny the transformation before her eyes. The silent, broken family that had inhabited Oak Ridge Manor for 3 painful years was gone, replaced by something vibrant and healing. If she had to surrender some control, some traditions, to facilitate that healing, perhaps that was a price worth paying. The wedding took place in August at the beach house, a small intimate ceremony with the ocean as backdrop and seashells decorating the simple altar. Lily scattered rose petals with solemn concentration, followed by the twins in matching suits, carrying the rings on a heart-shaped stone, the same one they had found with Lily on that first day by the stream. Eleanor, elegant in pale blue silk, watched with tears in her eyes as her son spoke vows of love and commitment to the woman who had once been hired to clean their home. Beside her sat Dr. Peterson, who had treated the twins for 3 years with little progress, now witnessing the culmination of a healing journey that had defied medical explanation. As Will and Sarah sealed their vows with a kiss, the gathered guests erupted in applause. Lily rushed forward to embrace them both, soon joined by the twins in a family huddle that said more than words ever could. Later, at the reception held on the beach house lawn, Will raised a glass to toast his new bride. To Sarah, who taught me that broken pieces can create a beautiful mosaic. To our children, who remind us daily of life's resilience, and to unexpected beginnings that arise from what we think are endings. As summer faded into fall, Oak Ridge Manor underwent its own transformation. Formal rooms were redesigned for family comfort. The twins' wing expanded to include a room for Lily. The gardens replanted with child-friendly spaces for exploration and play. Eleanor, true to her word, moved to the Beacon Hill townhouse but remained a regular visitor, gradually developing a warmer relationship with her new daughter-in-law and step-granddaughter. The twins thrived at Brookfield Academy, their progress noted by teachers as remarkable. Their past silence became a distant memory as they engaged fully in classes, made friends, and participated in school activities. Occasionally, in moments of stress or strong emotion, one or both might grow temporarily quiet, a reminder of old coping mechanisms, but these episodes grew increasingly rare. On a crisp October afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after Lily had first approached the silent twins in the garden, Sarah sat on the patio watching the 3 children rake leaves into enormous piles, then jump into them with shrieks of laughter. Will joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" he asked simply. Sarah leaned into his embrace, her hand unconsciously resting on the small swell of her stomach, where their newest family member was just beginning to make its presence known. "Beyond what I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "When James died, I thought that was the end of my story. Just survival for Lily's sake. I never imagined a second chapter could begin." "Not just a chapter," Will corrected, following her gaze to the children playing in the autumn sunshine. "Their whole new book." Sarah smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them here, from silence to speech, from grief to joy, from separate tragedies to shared healing. "The best stories are the unexpected ones," she said softly. "The ones that surprise us when we think the narrative is already written." Will's hand covered hers over their growing child. "And this story is just beginning." In the garden, the twins' laughter mingled with Lily's as they buried each other in colored leaves, their voices rising clear and strong into the October air, a symphony of healing that had started with the little girl's simple greeting on a day when silence seemed permanent and ended. With a family reborn from broken pieces, stronger at the mended places, filled with voices once thought lost forever.